Well, hi everyone. Thanks for joining the Wednesday webinar series by TechLogic. Today's today's webinar, we're going to be discussing designing your library with automation in mind and providing some useful tips and things to really consider while you're in the planning and building stages that sometimes can get overlooked. We'll have, let's see if we can get this going. Here we go. We'll have our presenters introduce themselves momentarily, but I'm David DeGranchamp, the Senior Solutions Specialist for the North Central here at TechLogic, and I'll be moderating today. And I've got over 10 years of experience working with public libraries and academic libraries to provide automation and software solutions. Joining in our discussion today are Tim Lawson, Tom Loy, and we also have our mechanical engineer, Lance Anglin. He'll be providing some expertise in answering any technical questions you might have. So we'll also be following up after the webinar, but if you'd like to contact any of us directly, you can find all of our information on the Contact Us page on the TechLogic website. The other thing is, if you've got any questions during the webinar, feel free to submit those in the chat box in the go-to webinar panel on your right, and we'll do our best to get to those at the end of the webinar. So we came across this quote by Louis Sullivan, who is the father of the skyscraper, and we found it very poignant because, as he says, every building is like a person, single, unrepeatable, and that's very much like public libraries. Our communities have unique needs, unique services, patrons, and TechLogic really uses this philosophy when partnering with libraries in design and application. So libraries, architects, and TechLogic are really the perfect fit to work together, especially in the early design phase when you're implementing automation, whether it be automated material handling or self-checkout, security gates. And a little bit about TechLogic. We were the pioneers of automation we were one of the pioneers of automation within public libraries. And in 1997, we designed the first AMH system with then director of Hennepin County Library, because he was dealing with a lot of repetitive motion cases with his staff. So we basically created the industry to address that problem. And over the last 24 years, we've been perfecting that technology. Some additional things: we're very proud of the touchless return process, and this doesn't require fumbling with receipts or touching screens, which is super important especially in the current and future climate right now, where touching materials and figuring out how patrons are going to interact with the library and its equipment. TechLogic was one of the first to implement RFID. So we were one of the pioneers of RFID technology. And along with RFID, we also provide barcode solutions. So whether you have a mixed environment or RFID or barcode, we can support you. So really everything we're going to cover today is going to be applicable for both setups. We've also worked with hundreds of new buildings and remodels, not only with automation or automated material handling, but we do offer other self-services such as self-checkout, staff circulation tools, security gates. And with that, I want to pass it over to Tim Lawson and Tom Loy to kick off the meeting.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, my name is Tim Lawson. I cover the South Central Territory. I've been with TechLogic a little over 7 years, and excited for the opportunity to speak with everyone today and to talk a little bit more about architectural design and new projects. I'll drop it over to Tom here.
Thanks, Tim. Hi, everyone. This is Tom Loy. Many of you probably know me. I've been in the industry for over 30 years and been a part of the TechLogic family since 2005. So I have a lot of experience with these kinds of projects. And when we first start talking to libraries about automated material handling, there are lots of things that we want to try to cover with planners and architects and administrators. But one of the first big questions that comes up is, why is a drive-up book return important as part of a project? And so I think a lot of you already know the answer to this, as it is in general terms. But from our perspective, we have found that patrons actually prefer a properly designed drive-up book drop. If it's done well, it will get used heavily, and there are lots of nuances relative to that. But it is designing a drive-up book drop is important to think through all of the details. Patrons love the idea that when they drive through a TechLogic book drop, they can simply throw items any orientation into the book drop and drive away, and the items are immediately checked in. These systems, book drops, get used 24/7. It certainly reduces forever a lot of the kind of drudgery work that happens within the back room of a library. They're safe. You don't have to get out of the car. Patrons love that. So if you can design a book drop so that it's easily accessible without having to do too many traffic changes or direction changes, your patrons will be very well served. So the other really important part of a drive-up book drop, obviously, is it's used during any kind of weather. It's not a bad idea to think about overhangs and things like that, so that when a patron does put their window down, they can do so without getting wet or too cold. So the next little part of this is just some general ideas relative to book drops. I think a lot of you already know. Driver side access, obviously. It's amazing to me, though, how many times the turning arc and driver side access becomes an afterthought. The turning arc, especially. Driver side access is kind of obvious, but allowing a patron driving a car to have easy and fairly close access to the book drop itself is always really, really important. The picture that you see here, Tim will talk a little bit more about it as well, but this is one of our libraries in the Johnson County system, where it's very easy to access because you're literally turning into the book drop. The bollards that you see there are about 4 inches, and the curbing is about 6 inches from the book drop. I'm gonna look at that a little bit more. Tim's gonna hit the bypass lane and the backup drop information. But in the next slide, we'll get a little bit better picture of this particular book drop configuration from a top-down view. So this is actually in a parking garage, and you can see we're looking down on this book drop. So the person in that picture is pretty close to being to scale, to give you an idea of the size. And as I said, those bollards are are there to protect both the car and the building. And in this scenario, if you can keep from hitting your mirror on one of those bollards, you're in good shape. So you will end up probably within 10 inches of that book drop, but if you're a little bit further away, that's okay too. Our book drops are hands-free, and you can place an item into that book drop single-handedly. So reaching out a little bit is very easy. A lot of times I get a question about the curb height, the exterior grade versus the interior floor. So the interior floor and the exterior grade, if they are pretty close to being the same, you're in really good shape. If that's impossible from a design perspective, that is no problem. TechLogic can get books really from point A to point B just about anywhere. So in the end, your height is going to be about 36 to 40 inches, and any vehicle from an MG midget to a big pickup truck can access these book drops. And again, the more thought put into this, the more successful they will be. So with that, I'm going to let Tim talk a little bit about the bypass lane and the backup book drops and the pickup window.
Thanks, Tom. Yeah, as Tom said, I think one of the big takeaways for architects and for libraries is to get TechLogic involved as early in the process as possible so that we can help through our expertise and the hundreds of book drops that we've done. We can help architects and contractors, libraries understand the importance of some of these items in the checklist. One of the things I'd like to talk about is a bypass lane. Many of our libraries that didn't do a bypass lane, unfortunately, wish they would have. It is important, especially if there's a holds pickup window, to have an option for patrons to get around another patron. So we do recommend installing those bypass lanes. They are important, especially for those holds pickup windows and drive up drop combinations. Next slide, please. The second piece that I'm going to talk about today is what we call our TechLogic backup magnetic book drop. This is a feature that is specific to TechLogic. We designed this application working with Hennepin County, one of our partner libraries. And how this basically works is we install a second book drop after the primary book drop. That secondary book drop will act as a backup, and it uses electromagnetic magnet to keep the book drop closed 95–98% of the time. So 98% of the time, patron pulls up and they go past the primary book drop, they cannot induct materials into that secondary book drop. Unless power is lost to the system, maybe a staff member on the interior of the sorting room puts the system in pause, maybe they're changing the sorting strategy. Maybe we're doing a preventative maintenance visit out at the library and we're doing a preventative PM, and we're going to use that backup drop in those cases. Also, in the very rare circumstance that a TechLogic system has a jam, the backup drop will automatically open. So this is just a secondary option for libraries. It's fairly inexpensive, and it's placed right after the primary book drop. What's really cool too is that staff, once the system's back up online, staff simply walks over to that backup book drop. They take the materials out of the bin that's located behind the wall there, and they just throw them right onto the sorting system, right onto the conveyance. So we do recommend considering a backup drop if you're going to be looking at a drive-up book drop. Next slide, please. Here's just another image. This is one of our partner libraries in Johnson County, Kansas. It's a brand new system that was just installed. They installed these backup drops at all of their locations. Next slide. The next thing I'd like to talk about is holds pickup window. In so many cases, unfortunately, the holds pickup window in some cases, it's located prior to the primary book drop. We do not think that that's an ideal solution. If at all possible, we really think it's best to have the book drop located prior to the holds pickup window. So if a library is considering putting in a holds pickup window, it's very important that there is a good queue of cars that are available for that holds pickup window, maybe 2 or 3 cars, because that's going to allow for people to be picking up their holds and queue for that holds pickup window after the primary book drop. Next slide, please. This next slide is just an example of a pour design. If I know it's tough with some of these buildings that are smaller to accommodate like a 3-car queue line, but here's an example of a holds pickup window located prior to the book drop. And the issue here is if a patron's coming into that holds pickup window, they've got a hold and staff are running around the library looking for that hold. First off, it's not going to allow patrons to return materials. The other piece of that is if we're able to locate the book drop prior to the holds pickup window, we can actually clear the patron's account, check in those materials prior to them even getting to the holds pickup window. Next slide, please. I just wanted to show you guys a video. We're going to go ahead and start this video. This is a video not to show you, we're really just showing you what systems, some of our competitive systems out there look like. This particular sorter requires that the patron presses a button in order to induct materials. They actually have to press a button to open the door. And they're required to place one item at a time onto an RFID pad through their car window. You can see this patron is trying to push the items onto the sorter. The sorter's not properly checking in the material, so it's sending the material back to the patron. We really don't think this is a patron-friendly book drop. It requires that the patron first off touches a touch screen or touches a button in order to induct materials. And we really feel that the touch-free book drop is going to give your patrons the best possible experience when they're returning materials. Next slide. I'm going to have Tom cover walk-up book drops.
Great, thanks, Tim. So a lot of the same thought process goes into a walk-up book drop that goes into a drive-up book drop. So certainly they should be located. These are exterior drops. They should be located where patrons can get to them fairly easily, and all times of day and night, with or without staff being in the building. So these, 24/7 weekend returns, that's just a standard part of any outside walk-up book drop. These are weatherproof, just like the drive-up drops. They're weatherproof. In this particular configuration, on the right and the left, this library implemented our Maglock backup book drops. As an aside, the first time I did one of these, it's been some years ago now. I was asked about it by a library, and they said, "Yeah, we lose power all the time." And I just thought, wow. It was hard for me to believe because I don't lose power at my house, but that particular library loses power all the time. So this was actually a really important design feature for them, and it's so easy to use because staff don't have to think about whether or not it's on or off. The system designates that. As all of our systems, this is a touchless multi-item induction. Here's a quick video of just a standard outside book drop. That could be either a drive up or a walk up drop. So that's outside because of that weatherproof automatic door. Those doors are activated through electronic eyes. And when we look at internal walk up drops, you'll notice a similar configuration of stainless steel bezel. We could do other deployments without that bezel, but that's when we quote systems, that's what typically comes with the sorter. I love what these architects and designers did with the center version. You can see the technology operate. You can see items being checked in. On either side are just two different deployments of the same technology. I think that the location of a book drop is something that an interior book drop is something to think about carefully. I want to, when a library asks me where these should go, I always say someplace where there's where they're easy to get to, but outside of the traffic flow. So now, once we get into the interior of a automated material handling system, we end up having to navigate a bunch of different elevations and conveyances. So I'm gonna let Tim take over from here.
Yeah, I'd like to talk about elevation differences and vertical conveyance for a moment, you guys. One of the absolute specialties of TechLogic is our ability to change elevations and actually change floors and convey materials through the floor or convey materials through the ceiling. We actually build in our system designs, every design, even if there isn't an elevation differences, because our system uses what's called a singulator. We actually, patrons are able to put stacks of materials into the book drop. When we take those materials in, they go up a ramp, and we use gravity to singulate or to pull those items apart. That's a unique feature of our system. We've been doing it for over 20 years, and we're experts in what we call this singulation. This same singulation, it also takes place prior to any type of vertical conveyance that we're doing. On the right side of this photo, you guys can see that we've got what we call our TechLogic sandwich conveyors. These sandwich conveyors allow us to take materials up into the ceiling. This is especially important if the library is maybe an existing building where we're renovating an existing building and there's really no way to put a sorter in close proximity to the interior and exterior book drops. Our specialty is coming into these buildings. Go ahead and play the video, Dave. And putting together these solutions where we can convey those materials across the entire library without staff having to go to one side of the library, pick up a big bin and roll it over to the other side of the library. It's really our specialty. We have multi-level systems. So here's an example of Garland Public Library in Texas. When we came to this library, this is one of our clients in Texas, and when we came to this library, they actually had this drive-up book drop on the right. You can see it had a small little slide that came down into this little basement area. And it's kind of crazy because when books would get inducted into that book drop, you could hear them slide down an elevation and whack into the bin. Basically, we were able to work with the library. They also had an elevator shaft and a fire ladder that was used to get down into that space. And the elevator shaft was kind of a rickety old elevator. Staff would have to go down into this basement 4 or 5 times a day to clear out that bin and bring it up this old elevator. We were able to design this system working with the architects in the library to take those materials directly down this drive-up book drop, de-shingle or bring up an elevation, go up the elevator shaft, the existing elevator shaft, down the hallway, and we actually have the curve of this conveyor in the public area, so it highlights the curve, which is a really cool feature, and down into the staff room. So it's just an example of a system that we had a problem. We worked with the architect in the library to design a solution that will make life easier for staff and for patrons. Tom?
Yeah, thanks, Tim. So you're looking at two versions of conveyance coverage. In the left-hand example, we installed a flat or horizontal conveyance through a tunnel that goes up into a book drop enclosure in a parking lot. So this is what is happening above this particular conveyance is a lot of automobile traffic day and night. And so because of the particular traffic flow for this library, this was the only way to get books or a book drop connected to the sorter by going underground. That's a significant piece of construction work that was done, but this library thought it was worth it because, again, for the next 20 years, that's how items are going to get from the parking lot, from the cars in the parking lot into the sorting system. On the right, again, same type of conveyance that is being suspended from a ceiling going through a parking garage. In the next slide, this was an existing library. This happens to be Virginia Beach Public Library. They installed an automated material handling system in the main library 4 or 5 years ago, and they wanted to connect an exterior 24/7 walk-up book drop to the sorter. And they had two choices, to go overhead or underneath, and they decided that they liked the idea of putting the conveyance in a trench. So on the left is literally what they did to prepare the site for that final product, which is what we see in the middle and the right. So as patrons walk in this library, they are literally walking over the conveyance. They can see books being conveyed from the outside book drop into the sorting room. That was obviously a very significant piece of construction work that they did to prepare the site. They of course did that with our help in design, but they love that. It's a great way to highlight the technology, and it's certainly an incredible way to get books from point A to point B. Some of you may have seen this library or been in this library. It's Seattle Public Library, one of our customers. And in this scenario, as was the case with Virginia Beach, they wanted to highlight the conveyance, the technology, and most importantly, to get the book drops out into the public where the patrons could actually use those easily. So they've got multiple book drops scattered throughout that structure on multiple levels. They all of those items get conveyed down to the sorting system where they're checked in and sorted. So we get a lot of questions about, can you do this? And it's always fun to show pictures of Seattle Public Library. Tim, is this one of your customers?
Yeah, it is. So just want to talk briefly, you guys, about this system. This system was actually featured in Library Design article earlier this year. It is the Johnson County Lenexa branch sorting system. It's the branch that you saw, that small kiosk in the beginning of the presentation. It's a very, very cool system. But just to take you through what you're looking at here, this is a system that has book drops, interior book drops, located on level 1 and level 2 of the library. We're merging those interior book drops right there at that kind of crazy looking spider thing up at the top there. That's where we merge the books and materials right there from the interior book drops. And then on the left side, in the left photo, you can see the deshingler coming up. And that line is actually running across a parking garage on the left side, running across the parking garage and through a loading dock area. And we were able to take this conveyance through the loading dock area, back up into the library, and all merge onto the line shaft of the sorter. Next slide. Here's another example, actually within the same library system, Johnson County Library System. They also installed a sorter that's similar with the drive-up drop overhead conveyance at the Monticello branch. And this is a state-of-the-art library, beautiful design, but they opted to go with a single-sided sorting solution. You can see that we again have the exterior drive-up drop. It's going up and over the staff area, and we call this a reverse decline conveyor, where we're coming down and doing a reverse decline. It's meeting up with the interior book drop and all merging onto the line shaft of the sorter there, for staff to deal with it there. Tom, go ahead.
Sure, thanks, Tim. So we're really just hitting on a few fairly important concepts relative to system design. One of the things that we always have to think about, though, are how to balance the traffic, meaning the item return traffic from the outside versus the inside, walk up versus drive up. So for instance, in a drive up scenario, if a walk up and a drive up book return are fairly closely located to each other, we might give preference over the walk up because there's no natural pause between patrons. There might be today, actually, but so in other words, with a walk-up book drop, I can walk up to the book drop, throw my books in, and walk away very quickly. At a drive-up, there's actually going to be a space between the cars that is natural because it takes time to move from one space to the next. So we'll give a little preference in the system design, both from a conveyance length and even system sort parameters to the walk-up book drop. And there are probably a few dozen other considerations that we would make in how to manage the traffic for the inside versus outside book drop. As you can see from this particular drawing, there's a lot of conveyance in this library. This was done because the site work that was required to build this particular library put the book drops conveniently located for patrons, inconveniently located for the sorters. So the library had us design and build and install a fairly extensive conveyance system. In the next slide, this is Halifax News Central Library. They've got multiple book drops at each location, inside, outside, probably a couple of 100 feet of conveyance that's installed in the ceiling, and an interior book drop that's more closely associated with the actual sorter itself. One of the questions that always comes up when I'm talking to libraries about these systems is the level of noise that is put off by the operation of a system. In the very beginning of the TechLogic design phase, back in 1997, the very first design parameter was it's got to be very quiet because it's going into libraries. And these spaces, in some cases, are open to the public. I mean, you can't walk around the sorter, but it's literally, from a sound perspective, open to the public. So all these conveyances, all these systems are very quiet. One last point about the book drop and those basic design parameters that go way back into the early days of TechLogic. Bob Rolfe and Mark Fritz, when they designed the system, one of the other parameters was don't make patrons learn a new skill in order to return books. So the book drop itself has to be very easy. We can't ask patrons to singulate or to go through a quiz before they can return books. So those kind of looking back into those early design parameters that were established, they still exist today. So Tim, I'm going to let you go with fire suppression.
Thanks, Tom. Lastly, I wanted to hit on one more feature that we offer at TechLogic, and that's what we call our TechLogic fire suppression system. These systems have been around for over 20 years. We've been designing fire suppression systems. Basically how this works is on any exterior book drop, whether it's a walk up, a drive up, there's always concern, and it varies from library to library, but there's always concern that a flaming book or a firecracker or something like that could be inducted into the sorter that could cause harm to the library. What we've built is a fire suppression system directly built into the conveyance. If the system detects any type of smoking or smoldering, something on fire, the guillotine type fire suppression system shuts that item down. It uses a powder system to distinguish the fire, and it also ties into the building's fire alarm system, so it can notify local fire department that there's been an issue. So that's just one of the features that we've built into our sorters. We understand that many libraries might work with architects and designers to do their own fire suppression system, but this is an option for architects. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about system size and sorting strategies. One of the main points here is that we're experts in consulting with libraries on building a proper sized AMH system for their not only current demand of physical materials, but also any potential increase they might have in a new building situation. Any system from even the smallest 3-bin sorter all the way up to our large central sorters, our 55-bin Chicago Public Library sorters, and anything in between. We're here to customize these systems to exactly the size that the library is going to need and not overdo it. We're going to look at the physical area within the sorter, what size system can be placed into the staff room. We're going to look at the physical circulation of materials and how often, materials are coming through the book drop. And then we're also going to consider staff needs as well as ROI considerations. We want to make sure that the library gets the absolute best return on investment for their sorter. And if that means, not connecting the sorters to interior, exterior book drop, we're going to work with the library and the architect to make sure that we put together a design that's affordable and it makes the most sense for everybody. Next slide, please. So just a recap of why you might want to work with TechLogic on your next architectural project is we are industry experts. We have hundreds and hundreds of material handling systems throughout the country. We've been doing this, as Dave mentioned, over 24 years. And we work directly with architects, libraries, contractors. Our Lance, the gentleman on the phone, our engineer, we will actually take your CAD drawings, your Revit files, and we'll place our systems directly into those models so that you guys can import the information right into your model and make it as easy on you as possible when you're designing the building. All of our systems are built and manufactured in Oakdale, Minnesota. So none of this stuff is coming from overseas. We're able to provide parts, expertise in manufacturing and engineering designs all locally here in the US. We offer patron-friendly book drops, and you can see that through our multi-item induction. Allowing these systems to take multiple items onto the book drop is the most patron-friendly solution possible. But in addition to that, we want to make sure that our patrons don't have to touch the book drop to induct materials, and that's something that's very important currently. Also, we can make sure that we can convey materials in any type of configuration. So if you have a current challenge, maybe it's a historical building, a Carnegie building, we can make sure that we can put together a conveyance solution that will be easier on staff and use our vertical conveyance to overcome some of the challenges. We really enjoy these challenges and coming up with solutions to your challenge. As we mentioned previous, we can do both barcode and RFID sorting. So if the library is RFID or if they're barcode, we could do either. And in some cases, we do both. Loveland, Colorado, for instance, they have a hybrid system, and we can check for an RFID tag at first. If it doesn't find an RFID tag, it uses a camera imager to scan and check in the material via barcode. Staff induction with our sorters, one of the important pieces of information we didn't give you is that our staff induction is very, very simple. A staff person can induct materials on a TechLogic sorter anywhere along the conveyance line. So that means there isn't a single use station. There isn't another station that staff have to sit at in order to induct materials onto the sorter. It's as simple as just tossing materials onto the belt. And then lastly, like we just talked about, fire suppression. Next slide.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and hop right in, Tim. We've got a few more minutes and about quite a few questions to get through. So let me go over to the chat. Now, guys, would you ever recommend a second sorter instead of an extensive conveyance?
I've done a number of those. It comes down to economics and access to the building, but I've got a library that has a book drop room on the first floor of I think it's a 5-story building, but the library doesn't start until the 3rd floor. So we've got a 5-bin system on the first floor that's an outside drop, and a larger system on the 3rd floor of the library that has multiple induction points. So yeah, it's always part of the conversation. It's not our preference, because in the end, you're still having to move books. In the case I just mentioned, those items are moved in bins on an elevator, but it's a staff person has to go down and do that. But it was really the only option for that particular library, but we can do it.
Great. And another question that came up here: how much space do you need for the conveyor to turn vertical turning radius? So what is the turning vertical radius? Would be a good one for Lancer.
Yeah,
Yeah, I can build that
one.
Yeah, it's a lot of math. So for the verticals, to go straight up, it is, let me just grab it right here real quick. You would need right about 6 feet of space from end to end on the vertical. So the radius would be about 6 feet of space from the end of the wall to the end of the vertical. But before that, we need to have the separator and a bottom conveyor on that part of the separation process. So you're looking at overall about 10 feet from it. Let's just say if you're going to put a book drop to a wall, so from end to end, you'd need about 10 feet.
Yeah, I'd like to add one thing too. One of the parts of that question was changing directions in the ceiling as well. Curves or changing directions. There's a number of different ways that we can change directions. There's actually 3 separate ways that we can change directions, whether it's a curved conveyor, we can use chutes to drop down on another conveyor to change directions, or we can use what's called a transfer section to change directions. So we have a number of tools in our bag to make it happen if it needs to happen in a short area. But like Lance said, we're going to work with the library to figure out how much space is available and find a solution to accommodate the space.
Great. We've got a cleaning question for you all. Is there a way to clean the tracks? This particular library has had beers and raw eggs put into their book drops before, and I can't imagine what the system what the system drags are out. So,
well, that's a waste of good beer, first off. But no, absolutely, yeah. There's ways to clean the system. The conveyor belts can be cleaned. We've been getting this question quite often, even with the coronavirus stuff that comes up. We typically do recommend, for instance, with cleaning for germs and stuff, 70% rubbing alcohol. But even a mild detergent could be mixed in with some water, and the belts could be cleaned. The whole system could be cleaned with a mild detergent.
Great. And then one of our final questions before we let everybody off. I know we kind of covered all the conveyance that we can do, but this question was, can you have a book drop on the other side of the street?
Yes, we've done that a lot over the years. In one of the slides earlier, I showed that exact configuration. One of the points I don't think I made, that particular tunnel in which the conveyance was located in that picture, that was a fairly large tunnel. A person could stand straight up in that tunnel and walk all the way over to the book drop. We've done lots of cool things relative to this very question. We're good at it. And it's frankly a lot easier to do this than to change traffic pattern on a city street. So it's always a challenge that we embrace.
Yeah, the one other thing I'd like to add to, Tom, is that we have a number of systems that we've gone up and over as well. So if a tunnel solution isn't plausible, maybe there's the water table issue, we can actually go up and over. And in some cases, if like it's a drive up drop with an overhang, we can build that conveyance right into the overhang solution. So there's a number of ways that we can do that.
Great. Perfect.
It sounds like you guys can do everything.
We try, right? Yeah. So we're right at that sweet spot and coming to a close with our scheduled webinar time. So if you've got any questions, feel free to email out to this webinar at techlogic.com, and we'll get your questions out to the proper contacts here, and we'll be sure to follow up with everybody that attended this webinar. So with that, we want to thank you for joining us today. So please stay safe and healthy, and we'll be chatting soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Thank you,
you.
guys.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.